Hi everyone, I'm Lewis Godwin. I'm the creative producer here at Isla. I wasn't here the last couple of weeks, so it's good to be back. This is the last session with Dave. Wow, thanks Dave. Wow. Thanks for the last couple of weeks. What are we looking at today?
Doing 3D.
Yeah, 3D stuff today. Yeah, nice. Pretty sure everyone's been here before, but if not, there's water you can grab over there. Bathrooms just around behind the curtain. Next week, we have a couple of these flyers floating around. Next week, Lab Rats, we have a presentation from a couple of artists from India who are presenting a show here as part of the Fringe. It's essentially, I think I've explained it before, it's essentially like a DJ slash VJ and like a live local performer as well, presenting their vision of India like 100 years in the future. So it's sort of like techno futurist interpretation. They use like a lot of game engine stuff, AI stuff, a lot of animations. The music it's a mix of like, they actually traveled all around southern India sampling a lot of like traditional musicians to recreate kind of like a futuristic techno version of the sounds and sites that they've grown up with, really. Performed this all around the world, but I reckon that might be worth checking out next week if that's of any interest to you. Just register, it's free. The show's ticketed, obviously, but yeah, they're going to do a little artist talk and they're going to sound check during the day. So all their stuff's going to be set up, and I think they're just going to walk us through a bit of their process and a bit of like, yeah, how they put it together and what's in their show. So yeah, definitely something worth checking out. I think that's it. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Sick. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Last week we're graduating. Are you doing it as well, Lewis? Or are you just working? You're watching. All right. We're entering the third dimension today, guys. Are you ready? This is something that I put together yesterday as a rough example of some simple things that we can do in 3D land. I'll kind of go, as usual, go slowly and tell me to go slower if I need to. And we'll go through the basics of how the basically 3D world and render engine and some like lighting and materials and stuff work inside of Touchdesigner. Who here has used 3D software before? Oh yeah, sick. Like Blender? Houdini? Yeah? All right, Houdini is good. So Houdini was like Touchdesigner kind of came out of Houdini, so I'm sure it will be if you're familiar with that, it will be very easy here. I think the main thing is wrapping head around like what it means to operate in a kind of 3D XYZ space. So I'm just going to delete all this. And who brought in an OBJ as well? You can have that? Yeah. Cool. So we can do, I'll get mine in. But if you don't have that, if you don't have an object, you can create I'll do a sphere, and you guys can bring an object in if you would like to drop your object. So a sphere, SOP. So yeah, today we're going to be using SOPs. So chops, 1-dimension numbers, tops, 2-dimension, pixels, and SOPs, 3-dimension points in space. So SOPs, blue SOPs is where all the 3D action happens. And to get my OBJ file in, I have got it saved in my Geo folder, in the project folder. If everyone's still working along with that. I've just been doing mine all 4 weeks in the same project file, and just drag it in, and it should come in as its own, what is this called? File in SOP. Like all the other ones, you can make these SOP viewers have a little bit more to them than the chops and tops in terms of what you can do inside it here. So if you make it active, it becomes a 3D viewer where you can kind of click around and see the object, which is useful for like just inspecting and making sure you've got the right thing and nothing's going wrong in that stage of the process. And you can also do, I don't use this a lot, but there's like, this is a bunch more options of like display things that you can do with SOPs if you want to play with that. The one thing that I use most regularly is the wireframe. If you have this active and you hit W, it will just, doesn't change the information, but it just changes the display of what we're looking at, which can be useful. So yeah, just have a look at what you're playing with. And then I think, yeah, if you get lost in here, you can click H within the viewer and it will take you back to home at any point. We'll get rid of that and we'll do that later. So if we have our sphere, I'm going to start with the sphere. So we can have a look at this and see where it comes in. It comes in as squares, and the way that 3D spheres work, if you're making it out of quadrilaterals, it has this stuff at the top. I don't think that is going to look as nice for what we want to do, so I'm going to change it to a polygon sphere in the drop-down menu, and we can see that makes it out of triangles instead, and it's kind of evenly distributed. And I can look at this and say I want to have more dense triangles than this. Like I want it to be a bit more spherical in my sphere, and you can go over to detail and bump that up, and you can kind of see it increases the density of your geometry here, which is good and nice and makes it look nicer, but it also increases the amount of computing power required to do anything that we're going to be doing later on. All right, so I'm going to leave mine at like 3 for now, and then what are we doing next? I'm going to do a facet. And which one is it? Unique points and compute normals. So I'm going to use this to tell it to stop trying to average out the way that the light is interacting with this geometry, and just keep it faceted, basically. So I'm going to do unique points on and compute normals on. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure why there are two, but I think they function differently. So you want the bottom one. Yeah. Actually, and while at this step, let's go through to look at how the rendering works, and then we can come back and edit the mesh after that. So I'm going to put a null SOP, and this is going to be the end of my network. So the way that the SOPs work is we're going to operate and go through all these changes within the SOP operators, and then at some point you're going to want to bring that out of 3D World and turn it into a top so that you can basically output it, whether it's rendering it out as a video or sending it to a projector or a screen or whatever. And to do that, there's a few steps. The first one is to send your final SOP into what is a geometry comp. So what I've done is I right click on the output of my SOP null, so I can say it's going into this geo, and then this has, yeah, not much in there, but it does all this stuff. And then after that, I'm going to make a camera comp. And this camera doesn't have to be connected to anything because it just kind of looks at everything. It just kind of renders. This communicates with all the geometries that are in your project or within this container. And then after that, I'm going to make a render top. So we can see making the render top, it automatically knows to connect to the geo and to the camera. And if we look in here, I can see that the star means everything that is suitable for this. So it will automatically render all the geos within the container, and it's rendering this camera, camera 1 by default. And I'm going to put a null top in here as well and make this the viewer so we can see what's going on. So we can see that the sphere is being looked at, but it's flat because we don't have any lights in the scene. And to do that, I'm going to go back into the comps and make a light comp. And maybe now at this point as well, I will make our geometry viewer. So if you go up to this arrow here, we can change the control panels. So I'm going to split this into 2. So by default, that makes just another version, which can be handy if you want to be like, have a big network and want to be connecting things that are far away from each other. But I'm going to change this panel type to being a geometry viewer. And this will give me this kind of bigger, yeah, a bit more like perspective and a bit easier to see what it is that we're working with. So I'm just going to leave that there so I can see what's going on. And you can also, it's also handy, so if I'm selecting stuff, you can see what it is that we're playing with. So I'm going to select my light and can see that the light at the moment, it's shining face on. And going to play around with this translate and say if I want it to be closer, it can be like that. If I want to light it from the side a bit, I might change the x-axis, and we can see in the geo viewer that it is moving left and right on the x-axis. If I change the Y, it'll go up and down, etc. So maybe let's just leave that there for now. Maybe I'll make another light, get a nice little backlighting situation. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. And then let's send this one over here. So, and then because everything in Touchdesigner is like easy to switch and change, I can also just swap out that geometry for this one here and see how that looks in the space. But let's keep it like that for now. And then what do I want to do next? Let's add a noise SOP in here. So I'm going to go back to where our facet was and put in a noise SOP. Which kind of breaks it apart. I think that's just because something that the facet does. And, oh no, I confused. I was going to do something else. We'll do the noise later. going to do primitive. So primitive SOP. And this, if we go over to the transform tab, will allow us to do transform to each of the individual elements that makes up the shape that we're sending into it. So if I adjust the scale here, you can see it's altering each individual triangle that is making up the mesh. So maybe, yeah, we can leave that like this for now. And then, what else did I have on this? I created some chop animation. So if we want to animate this, maybe let's make the primitive scale be moving up and down with an LFO. So I'll go for an LFO, and I know I want it to go into a math and then into a null. So I'm going to hold down Shift, click all those three. And then let's connect this, make the chop viewer active, and drag that onto the scale number of the primitive. We can see that's going from -1 to 1 because that's the default that the LFOs do. So I'm going to use the math to adjust this range. So I want it, instead of being -1 to 1, I want it to be like, let's say 0.2, so they don't completely disappear. And maybe, I don't know, is it cool when they go bigger than 1? That's kind of interesting. Let's leave it like that for now. And I'm going to make this way slower. And we can, yeah, like everything else and like the things that we were doing last week, you could apply this kind of chop-driven animation to any of these parameters. So if we want to, this will change the rotation of each primitive. So you can animate that if you want to animate that. In the same way that we just animated the scale, or however you would like to. So I might leave that like that for now though. And then the other option for animating is changing and transforming the item within the actual geo comp, which is just another way to do it. So this is you can adjust the scale. You see this is changing the size. I might create a constant speed and null to say I want to make some, what's that doing? Disconnect. To make this whole shape rotate by animating one of these values in the geometry panel. So we can see if we want it to animate that way, like that's animating on the y-axis, so it's spinning that way. Animating on the z-axis, we'll send it going in this direction. Or you can see, yeah, x-axis will make it spin. Oh, gets a bit funky if they're all different. But which way should we send it? Let's make it go that way. So again, I'm going to put a loop on my speed, and I'm going to make it clamped at 360 because I know there's 360 degrees in a full rotation. I'm going to make this about 20 speed, so it's moving at a decent pace, and then drag this value over to the geometry rotation piece. Speed, I just set it to loop. and set the maximum to 360. And now let's put some color on this thing. So we do that with another different operators that we haven't used yet is the materials. So they've got their own matte class. And we're going to do this with a Fong for now. And this comes in as the, basic material creator. So if you change this, you can adjust the color. And in order to apply it, you just drag. You can make a null, I guess, but I normally just drag this directly onto the geo and say I want this to be the material parameter. And it applies this material to this object. So these things you can kind of play around with the numbers and see what you can get to, see if you can come up with something interesting. It doesn't have to be active. Yeah, so you want it to be not active because you're not referencing this. Yeah, I don't think this is really an actual thing. You're just wanting it to be. I don't know where it goes to. I don't know. Yeah, here we are. And then if we want to add some more like texture or a bit more interest to these materials, you can apply tops to the materials, which are then applied to the geometry. Can be a fun way to get different stuff going on. So I'm just going to make a ramp, and then I'll make it a null in case we want to add anything else to it later on. But let's make this and then drag this. Don't need to make this active either because I just want it to reference the entire operator. And let's make this a color map of this material. And I think it looks like it kind of multiplies on, so I'm going to set the diffuse back to white so it can carry the full color through. And then that kind of sends this image, wraps around the texture, and then it sends it to there. Ooh. And we could maybe animate this as well. I'll just drag that rotation. And you can see this looks pretty low resolution. So all of the SOPs, you would notice there's no like option for resolution in here because it is, operating in 3D space. So it's similar to vectors. It's just points and lines in space. So you don't have to think about resolution until it hits the render top. But this is applying to the texture, to the geometry here. And you can see it's pixelating a bit, so I'm going to bump up the resolution of the ramp, and that makes it a bit crispier. Maybe I'll make this smaller so it gets stripy. Does that all make sense? Any questions? Yeah? Let's do it again, and I'll do it with a different object. So let's go. I'm going to make another sphere. I'll turn this one off for now. If you want to turn anything off as well, the X is just stop. So it won't, this stops the computer from, it just doesn't think about that thing anymore, similar to bypassing these things. It's just, don't worry about it, and it will skip over. So we'll make a sphere again. I'm going to make sphere, null, right click on the output, make a geometry, and then that sphere will appear because it is also, this render is now looking at both of the geos, and it uses the same lighting and the same camera. And what else can we put in here? We can make a transform SOP, is pretty useful. If you wanted to, like adjust the shape, rotation, whatever. Of your object, and those can be animated as well, obviously. And maybe I'll make this a bit more detailed. Let's go up to 6. And I'm going to put a noise SOP in here as well. And this one's pretty easy way to get some blobby, fun 3D action. Let's put that back to normal. And similar to the other noises that we've used, the seed, period, harmonics, roughness is all pretty, it uses the same information basically, but we're just visualizing it 3-dimensionally now. So if we can see, like, bring the period down makes the noise a lot more compact, and if you make it bigger, then it's a lot like larger kind of impact. And this is, you'll notice if you go into the transform here, this noise comes pre-packaged with a little bit of Python code that is using to animate it. So this is pretty handy. It's like a kind of quick and dirty way of animating stuff using ABS time.seconds. But I have had, if you have projects that are going to be running for a long time, the numbers can get really high, and then it can sometimes confuse things. So I try not to use this like this anymore for my projects, just in case. But if you turn that off, it will stop the animation, and we can, maybe we'll grab this animation, copy and paste the LFO chain from over here, and we can apply this to the noise. Maybe I want it to be on the amplitude. fun, like breathing or heartbeat or something. Maybe I'll make this a bit smaller as well. And then I'm going to go to the geo, and to add a material to this again, I'm going to double click matte Fong. And then let's drag this on here, and I want it to be parameter material. And let's make this like red. Pink. And there's all, if people that are familiar with 3D software, you can see there's inputs here for all of these, like color, like normal maps for bumps, and then all of these different maps you can import images, which would be those kind of things, and then just plug them in here. Or you can also use a PBR, which has similar, and I think more detailed maps. They use like substance, substance map stuff. I haven't used it a lot in my work, but if you're familiar with that, this is the place to do that. Does that make sense? Is everyone along for the ride on getting a second object in the scene? Cool. So now you can see in the viewer here that even though this object isn't being rendered in here, it's still happening. But if we turn this back on, it'll be both of them interacting with each other in this scene here. And maybe I want to make that a bit smaller again. And let's have a look. Maybe I'll show you how to reference between different projects. So have you guys been doing each of the weeks in the same project, or have we started a new project each time? Yeah, cool. So I'm just going to close this for now. But if I go into a split left and right, I'm going to go and have a look at, just going to like this. If I go back and get the audio track from last week, it can be fun to like take this kind of information, so you can, use anything to reference anything, which I feel like is the theme of this whole thing. But if I want to reference from far across the same network or in between containers or different components, I can make a select chop, because I know that I want to bring some chop information from elsewhere in my project and I want to use it in this part over here. So I'm just got the select and I'm dragging this information over to that, and I want it because it's saying look at this chop that's over here and just replicate it in here. So I've got that now. I can close that. And maybe I'll change it so that this is driving the amplitude of our noise instead. So yeah, that's kind of a simple way to use that audio reactivity in the 3D realm. Yeah. What else did I have? I had a little box. So let's make one more object, and we can drive that with some randomization. So I'm going to go back into SOPs and make a box. And again, null. Geometry comp. And that will render automatically. And then let's say for this one, I want it to be a wireframe. Wireframe material and drag that onto the geo. Actually, no, not a wireframe, my mistake. A line. Kind of similar, but a little bit different. And if we have a look in the line here, this has some cool depth stuff with, you can tell it how to do different things depending on how close the object is to the camera. So if I want to make my lines, thicker, thinner, kind of taper off as they get farther away from the camera. And then also in the line spot here, we can change the color of the line. And maybe I want it to be green when it's far away, and I don't know, darker green when it's far. And a lot of this stuff is quite simple, and I guess a lot of the stuff that I do specifically is like simple tools, but try and use them in a way that the layering up creates complexity and interest. And with these kind of things, like a lot of the vibe and personality of the work, I guess, can come from the way that the animation is used, and the just using chops to create movement and motion that has something interesting to it. So let's say for this, I want to make this box kind of randomly change size and shape and bounce around a bit. So I'm going to make a pattern which comes in and looks like a wave, but the way I use the patterns a fair bit is to generate random non-repeating integers. So you're going to choose that from the drop down, and then I want to make, instead of generating 1,000 non-repeating integers, I want to make one at a time. And maybe let's make it between 1 and, let's do 1 and 360. And so this has already created a random number, and if I hit the trigger, it will regenerate, and you can see this is bouncing around. And if I connect this to a null, and then I can send that null to be, let's make it the X rotation of this cube. That has changed the rotation of the cube to 7 degrees. And then if I click it, it will kind of randomize. And then maybe for this, I want to make it, just for testing purposes, I'm going to make a keyboard in chop, which is pretty handy. So keyboard in by default is my number 1 number button, and I'm going to reference this number 1 to trigger a new random number. So now every time I click that 1, it's going to create a new number. And if I want to make a different value for my X and Y rotation, actually first before that I'm going to put in a lag here. And let's see what that does. So the lag from last time, it kind of smooths out and slows down the transition between numbers. And you can kind of play around with this. Whoops. To see what different kind of feelings you can get from animating in different ways. This was just a box. Yeah. So yeah, this is all we're working with so far for this piece. Does anyone else have any questions so far on this part? Yeah. Random non-repeating integers length should be 1. Yeah. Lewis? So this is, I think it's kind of, I read it as basically like an in and an out. So, or a start and a stop. Yeah. Yeah, so if it's 0, it will do nothing. I'm not sure if it will, yeah. Oh. Yeah, so the way that we're using it, the out number doesn't really do much. So you would use the out would be more like if you're using a value to say like go to this, and then when the number goes back down, it will drop. But because it's just moving between 2 points, it's like the in is kind of the only really parameter that affects this movement so much. Oh, no, what's it doing? It's going up and down. So it's like if it goes up, it refers to the first one, and then if the value goes down, it's referring to the second one, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you're not supposed to use the lag that way. Another one that does something similar is a filter, which I don't know if that has a relation to like music stuff so much, but it's kind of a similar smoothing effect on the filter. And that's a bit of a simpler interface. So either or. But yeah, so now we've got this. I'm going to kind of copy and paste to make X, Y, and Z values. And if you see, these numbers are changing and they're random, but they're the same as each other. And that comes from the seed here. So if you just change this like seed, it will be a totally different type of randomization. Well, not a different type, but a different sequence of randomized numbers. So we've got this. I'm going to grab this next one and send it to the Y rotation. And then I'm going to make this one active and send it to the Z rotation. And now I've got that flipping all over the place. Something else that is handy is if you have multiple operators that are the same type, you can select them all at once. And I think this should make edits across all of them at the same time, just a time saver. So those are all changed now. And then maybe I want to say, do the same thing, change my X, Y, Z values, but I want to do it on the dimensions of the square. So I'm going to copy and paste this same thing again, except instead of wanting it to be between 0 and 360, that would be really big on the scale. So maybe I can have a fiddle with the scale here and see what limits I want to set myself. So maybe like 6 is a good maximum. And we can change, well, what we can change the pattern to be between 0 and 6. And then go down here and go scale X, Y, Z. And then maybe I don't like that effect. And a lot of this kind of stuff is like fine tuning and just finding like the sweet spot in the values and the numbers to be like what is the effect that you're going for, like finding something that feels nice, and whatever. But what I'm going to do is put in a math between the pattern and the filter here, because I want to, instead of putting out numbers between 0 and 6, let's say I'll put out numbers between 0 and 100, and then I'm going to remap them to between like 0.2 and 6. So instead I want to change it from being 0 to 100 to 0.2 and 6. And the other thing that is very useful to know when you're playing around with 3D stuff is just moving your camera. So like everything in this, we've got X, Y, Z values on the placement of the camera. And if I bring back the geometry viewer here, we'll be able to see the camera. So I can see that this is camera selected here, and if I move it, it will kind of move back and forth, and I can say I want to fit more in. Or the other one is adjusting the field of view of the camera, which is basically like a lens, changing the lens. What do you call that, Richie? Lens length? Yeah. So if you want it to be, focal length. Kind of similar to that. Something fun also is playing around with this. So change from orthographic and perspective as the two options. So orthographic is I don't know, loses the perspective bit of it, and it can make things look a lot more natively digital, I don't know, computer styles. Good for certain things if you're trying to achieve a certain effect, but that like option is in there to tick off and on. Yeah. And another way, if I wanted to like, oh no, I should have made that a null. If I want to switch this to be an automatic pulsing instead of having to hit the keyboard, I might make an LFO and make that do a pulse. And that just goes basically the same thing as what I'm doing, tapping on the keyboard. And I'm going to send that. So this is a trick because I've made a bit of a mess here, not using the null. And now that if I've created another channel and it has a different name than what this is expecting to receive, like if I was to reference this null and then send another channel into it, what's it doing? I don't know. Maybe that is fine. Whatever. I'm just going to relink all of these things so that they're going to be triggered by the LFO instead of my keyboard button. So now that is automatically animating. And you can kind of repeat this a lot. You can also add in geometry within this SOP chain here. So like if I've got this pink sphere here and I want to add in another piece of geometry to create a composition or like a sculpture, image, whatever, maybe I want to add another box in here and I can go a merge. So I'm just adding this into this, looking at this little chain here. That is the sphere leading up to the null, which is going to be going to this geo. And before the null, I'm going to put in a merge. And you can put in as many SOPs as you like into a merge, and it kind of connects everything into one shared geometry. And I'm going to put in a transform so that I have gives me the ability to arrange this. And so I can translate or move it in space, left, right, up, down, backwards, forwards. Which, doing the numbers like this is a little bit less easy and intuitive than if you're using something like Blender for 3D stuff. But, pros and cons of things. And then if I want to change the scale, maybe I want this to be a real long stick. Which, I don't know, let's put that there for now. And then you'll notice as well that this cube that I've dropped in automatically has the pink material added to it. So because these things are merged and then go through to the geometry, everything that's in this specific geo will have, you can only have one material per geo. But because each of these three elements are in different geos, we can have the different materials added to them. Maybe let's merge in my other OBJ here as well. I'll put that in the mix. And let's see where that goes. But yeah, lots of just simple things kind of repeated and laid and added on top of each other can be used to create pretty powerful stuff. Yeah, and then once you have this render out, you are treating this like we have been playing with all of the other topland things. So yeah, you can like integrate this with other imagery coming in, edit it in the way that we have been editing other stuff in previous weeks, and kind of do anything that you want with it once it's in top space. Does that all make sense? Yeah? Yeah. Yes, in here. Yeah, I just put a transform here and said comp over background color and changed the background to 1. Yeah, transform top. And that just gives me the black background. And then the other one, what I'm doing here is hitting P key, makes your panel come and go. What else can we do here? What do we got? 10 mins? We can do, yeah? Yeah. 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 So the way that I would do that in here is you can create a null comp. I mean, you can make it look at the geo if you want to, but nulls are a more kind of like flexible way of doing that, which I'm sure you'd use in Cinema 4D and whatever. But yeah, null comp, by default, they're sitting at 0, 0, 0. And then you can drag that on here and say, look at. And then if you move the camera, if we move the camera like left and right, you can see it's, yeah, if we see over here, the camera's like moving left and right, but it's still looking at, yeah, the world 0. Yeah, comp operators, null. Yeah. All right. Is there anyone else have any questions or having trouble? Merge. Just, yeah, merge SOP. Oh. And you can just drag whatever in, but I have it in the network here just before the null that's going into the geo. And then you can just link whatever you want into it. If you guys are pretty onto it, let's have a look quickly at instancing. Is another pretty powerful tool that Touchdesigner is really good at and is used for a lot. Easier way to show it. So I'm going to use a grid, which if it is 10 by 10, so for instancing on a grid that is 10 by 10, so 10 by 10 points. So we can see in here there's 100 points that are being used to create instances, and then I can go into this noise and tell this noise that I want it to be 10 by 10 pixels, and this will create an image that has 100 different colored pixels in it. And then I should be able to use that as instancing color. Yeah, so you can kind of create random colors using this image, instancing the color across each instance created on the points of the geometry that are going into it, which this can be used a lot for, this is kind of a way of bringing top imagery into three-dimensional space. So a lot of people use this kind of technique for like connect point cloud, live 3D, 3D volumetric capture, image texturing stuff. And yeah, also a good way of just manipulating imagery in 3 dimensions. But yeah, you can see this is basically this image, and if you were to replace this with whatever you wanted to, can do a lot of different things with it. Yeah, any questions that anyone has for the whole group? So this, do you mean from the very start, the instancing thing? So this is going like connected in here, and what I'm telling it with the instance here is I want this geometry to be instanced along these points. So dragging this null, which has the grid, into the translate operator, and then selecting the translate X, Y, and Z as point P01, P0, P1, P2, and that basically tells it that I want to recreate this geometry at each of these X, Y, Z points, which the information is coming from this null. But yeah, I don't know. It took me a while. It still takes me a while to get my head around it when I try and do it. What is that talking to? That's just sending to the render. Yeah. This is the render top. So this is the original render top that we placed at the very start. Yeah, you need a camera and a render and probably a light anytime that you're working in 3D world. Render top, yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. Do let me know if you're ahead on this. Let me know if there's specific things or like projects that you're thinking about that you would want to use this for, and I can like either point you in the right direction or send you hot tips for other tutorials. Like there's so much good stuff to look at, or help you out as much as I can. Yeah, I'll send a bunch of links in the final email as well. Yeah, so that was a like audio reactive video playhead thing. So as this guy's made it, and it's I don't remember exactly how it works, but it's basically a video file coming in and then like scrubbing and moving through that. Yeah, a lot of this is, I feel like I've gone through stuff that maybe isn't the most exciting, like finished outcome that we'll end up with right now, but hopefully it's, useful to get your head around, like how to actually use the program and kind of build on that and work through it and get comfortable with it, and then have those tools to be able to make some cool stuff. But yeah, there's so many like tricky tricks, and people that are a lot better with the like more intensive like codey stuff than I am that make a lot of those tools. But yeah, if we've got an hour of free time, play, keep going, and I can help everyone catch up, or